Welcome everyone. So I've been streaming and recording a few of Star Wars Rebellion games in the last few weeks because of the ongoing tournament, and I just realized that many of you might not know how to play the game, what the rules are, and what to appreciate about how the games go on and turn out. So with this in mind, I thought that I might as well make a how to play video about Star Wars Rebellion, and so this video is basically that. The game itself was released, I don't know, about maybe in 2015, 2014, sometime like that. It takes place in the Star Wars universe, and yeah, it was released by Fantasy Flight Games, I think. It takes place between Rogue One and Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. And it's played between two players, one taking the Rebel side and the other playing as the Imperials. Now, the game itself is quite long. It usually takes between 1.5 to 3 hours to play a game. And you can actually play this on Tabletop Simulator as well. There is a free mod you can download after you purchase Tabletop Simulator, and there's a Discord community where you can easily find games regardless of what time zone you're in. Usually there are like 10 or 20 games each day, so it's quite easy to find opponents. And if you'd like to try it, I highly encourage you. I will link the Discord channel for the Rebellion community in the video description. So let's dive into it. As I mentioned before, the game is between two players. It is very asymmetric. So as the rebels, you select one of these systems. A system is basically a planet, like Kashyyyk here, or Tatooine, or Bespin. So you select one of these locations. There is a probe deck. This is the probe deck. And the probe deck contains all of these systems that do not start as a starting location for the Empire. The Empire starts with 5 locations at the start of the game. You can see in this game I set up the Imperials start with Seleucami, Mandalore, Magito, Sullust, Mustafar, and of course with Coruscant. That's a given. We do not really count that, and there is no probe card for that. The other 5 is semi-randomized, so there is a pool of possible starting locations for the Empire, and from that they draw 5. And except those 5, the rebels can select any other location where they will hide, where they will establish the secret rebel base. So they do so, and the goal for the Empire is to find that base, locate where the rebels are hidden, destroy all the ground and all the space units, so every rebel unit that is in that secret rebel base, or alternatively use the Death Star and the, let me just find it really fast, or the Death Star with the super laser card to blow that planet up, and then they win. That's it. That's the goal for the Empire. Find the rebel base, locate it, destroy all the rebel forces on it, or blow the place up. Now for the rebels, it's quite a different story. For the rebels, you see, you start with an objective card in your hand, in this case, this objective card, and at the end of each turn, you draw another objective card from the objective deck. There are ultimately 14 cards other than the one you start with in the objective deck. And you draw these, and each of these cards has a number at the upper left corner. In the case of the Defend the People objective card, it's a 1. So if the rebels manage to, in this case, have at least 4 rebel systems containing a rebel unit, they can, in this specific card's case, play this card at the end of the turn, score an objective point, and move this objective marker 1 down in this tracker, because it scores you a single objective point. Now, at the end of a turn, you also move this time marker 1 up in this tracker. So as you progress through the games, because it is like obviously consisting of turns, so as you go through the game, you will move the time marker up. And as the rebels score more and more objective, you move the rebel reputation marker down. And whenever these two meet, or whenever the rebel reputation marker goes below the time marker, instantaneously the rebels win the game, because they managed to collect enough sympathy throughout the galaxy to basically throw over the Empire. So the goals are very much different for the two factions, and their means to achieve it are very much different as well. Now let's go. The reputation marker starts from this 14 location, like from number 14. It can go up, like the Imperials have a few select missions that can move this marker up, basically giving them an extra turn to find the base. Now, zooming out to the board again, when you set up the game, I already talked about having the Imperials having 5 starting locations. The Rebels also start with starting locations, places where they have loyalty. These are also semi-randomized. There are some locations that can be rebel loyal at the start of the game. And in this case, it happens to be Mon Calamari, Botwo, and Naboo. Now, you might have noticed that there is a difference between the Imperial markers in these systems. Some of them show the Imperial insignia or flag, and some of them show the face of a stormtrooper. The difference is that these places where the Imperial sign is shown are loyal to the Empire. The people there support the Empire. The places where there is only a stormtrooper's face present are, when it comes to loyalty, neutral, but they have been subjugated by the Empire. There is an Imperial presence there on the ground of the planet, holding them hostage and making them work for them. Less efficiently, but still, these places are under Imperial control, although not being loyal. So if you would go through these systems, you could say that when it comes to loyalty, Mon Calamari is loyal to the rebels, Seleucami is loyal to the Empire, but Kessel, which has no sign on it, or Mandalore, which only has a subjugation mark on it, are considered neutral when it comes to loyalty. Okay, so with that out of the way, oh wait, one more thing. There are some places like Yavin, Dathomir, Tatooine. These are remote locations. There aren't really much of a population around. So in these remote systems, there is no loyalty. You cannot gain loyalty or subjugation for that matter. Okay, so with this out of the picture, at the start of the game, you get to start with some units. And the first to place their units at the start of every game are the Imperials. Now the Imperials start with quite the fleet. They start with the Death Star, 3 Star Destroyers, 3 Gozanti Assault Carriers, an AT-AT, 5 AT-STs, 12 stormtroopers and 12 TIE fighters. The Imperials may place these units anywhere on the map where they start with either a loyalty or a subjugation, but they have to have a ground presence, a ground unit, at least a single stormtrooper on every single one of their starting systems. So I'm not going to place much thought into how I distribute these units. This video is not going to be about strategy or anything fancy in that matter, just the basic rules and how to play and, you know, that sort of things. But I will place these units in a fashion that you could see, for example, when you check a game of Rebellion. So yeah, you place these units out here and there, however you see fit. But you need to have at least a single stormtrooper on every single one of these Imperial starting locations. So a ground presence may mean stormtroopers, ATSTs, AT-ATs, assault tanks, which the Empire does not start with, or shield bunkers. Also, the Empire does not start with any shield bunkers. They can build those later throughout the game. After the Imperial player places all of their units on their starting units on the board, it is now the Rebels' turn to go and distribute their troops. Now the Rebels start with 6 troopers, 2 air speeders, a transport, a Corellian corvette, 2 X-wings, and 2 Y-wings. The Rebels can then split their forces between the hidden Rebel base, which you can see this little space at the side of the board. Of course, this could be any of the systems that are not starting as Imperial locations. So after the Rebel player selects one of these probe cards, that probe card will be placed here, for example, Toydaria in this case. And then Toydaria would be the secret Rebel hidden base. But before the Rebel player does that, they can choose to split their forces and place them somewhere on the map that is not an Imperial starting location, so anywhere. They can place them on a Rebel loyal system, they can place them on a remote system, they can place them on a neutral system, anywhere, but only one place, only one location, and the rest of the forces they can place to the hidden base, to this hidden base location. So let's say that the Rebels, I don't know, place a few air speeders to the base, some of the fighters. These Y-wings and X-wings are considered fighters. I will go on to what is considered a fighter and what is a capital ship later. And let's say that they place the rest of their forces to Tatooine, for example. Again, this is not like a good start by any means or anything that I thought about. It's just something to showcase how the game would be played. So once this is done and the units are deployed, we proceed, because this is somewhat of a scripted setup with this mod, we then proceed, and each of the sides draws 2 of these action cards. There are some possible action cards, 8 possible action cards on the Rebel side, and 6 possible action cards on the Imperial side, out of which both players draw 2 randomly. Now these are of course in secret, so the other player does not know what the other player drew. These are special unique powers relating to one of one of the characters that each side has. So each side starts with 4 characters. So the game is somewhat of a worker placement game. If you're familiar with board games, then it will make a lot of sense to you. So these characters kind of are like the workers that you place around the map, and you do the actions with them, you do the missions with them, and so on. So these action cards are actions that these leaders can take later on in the game, or sometimes they are not related to one of these leaders, but rather can relate to any of the leaders. In this case, for example, the rebels drew C-3PO. This means they can now attach this 3PO ring to one of their leaders, granting that leader a bonus in certain missions. Since this card also specifies that it's an immediate action card, this has to be played immediately after drawn. So in this case, rebels drew this card. It is an immediate action card. They play it. They place 3PO to accompany Mon Mothma, granting Mothma a higher chance to score certain types of missions. All right, this is then placed aside so that each player can reference it later. And the rest of the starting action cards are discarded and will not be used throughout the game. The other action card for the rebels is relating to Leia, which is, as you can see, an assignment. Now, an assignment is something that you can do basically at the start of your turn later on. And the other 2 action cards for the Empire, one of them is relating to Taj. It can be played at the start of combat if Taj is in the system where the combat is taking place. So you need to have the leader in the system where you play a certain action card. And the other one is Vader's action card, which is a special action card, and it has its special conditions when a player can use it. Okay, so this has been resolved, and then we go on, and how we go on is the rebels can now actually go and select their hidden fleet location. This is now that time. So let's say that they are going to be playing by the lore of Star Wars, and they select the moon of Yavin as their, or Yavin in this case, as their secret rebel base location. They place this card face down next to their location where the units are. Then they shuffle the probe deck. Okay. So when this is done, we go on, and then each of the players draw 2 missions from the mission deck. Now I have to specify that the game itself, the original game, had an expansion later on. I think when Rogue One came out, about that time, the game got an expansion. And the expansion has some new possible units. It has a new mission deck. So basically the players can choose between the ROTA, or Rise of the Empire. Yeah, I think the expansion was called Rise of the Empire. So that's why people just say that it's the ROTA or ROTA mission deck. They can choose to play with that, or they can choose to play with the base mission deck. And they can also choose to use the base setup, which you can see right now, and the expansion setup, which is a little bit different. Now, usually players in the Discord community prefer to play with the base setup, and then each player has their own preference when it comes to selecting either the base or the expansion mission deck. At the moment, I selected the base mission deck for each side, but this doesn't really influence how the game works when it comes to core mechanics, when it comes to like how the game is played. It only influences what personal strategy is worth pursuing. The expansion also introduced a new combat system, which is a lot more detailed and enables a lot more nuance than the base game did. So that's another reason why usually players will be using the expansion. I'm not going to talk about how the base game's combat system worked and so on. I think all games in the tournament will be played with the expansion, and then some players may use the base decks or the expansion decks to their preference, but the mechanics will be the same. Let me drink for a moment because yeah, it's a lot of talking. It's gonna be a long video. I'm sorry. I will try to be, I don't know, I'll try to really go through everything you have to know to understand how to play this game. Okay. So at the start of the first turn, both players drew 2 new mission cards. Now the other 4 they had in their hand already, these 4 in the Empire's case and these 4 in the Rebels case, are considered starting mission cards. These you can play each turn, and after you play them, you get them back at the end of each turn. You cannot lose these cards. You can reuse them every turn again and again. Now the other cards, the other missions, after you play them, except for a few exceptions, you dispose of them and they go to the discard pile. Now the discard piles in this game are open knowledge. Like any player can go through their own or their opponent's discard pile to look at the cards they played already. Okay, we will go through how missions work, but for now, let's just say a few words about how a mission card is basically how it looks and what each part of it means. So you can see that on the upper left corner of the card, there is a number and then an icon. The number and the icon tells you what players can play this mission. There are 4 different icons or skills in this game. There is this red icon, which is a fist. There is this, basically it's intel, so no, it's not intel, sorry, it's logistics. So it's a white logistics icon. Then there is this blue intelligence icon, and then there is the yellow loyalty icon. And when it comes to cards that have a higher impact, they may need more skilled leaders to play them. So in this case, this card can be played by a leader who has at least 2 yellow loyalty icons, skill icons, or in this case, 2 red fist icons. You can see at the other side of the table for the rebels, they have the same 4 basic icons, although their missions and their effects are not the same. They quite much differ. And you can see that there are some missions that require higher skill in this case to be played, and there are even some missions that require 3 of the same skill icon. There are no missions that require more than 3, and there are no missions that require a different set of skills to be played. Now, except at the very start of the game where the Imperials started to place down their units and then the rebels could react and place theirs after, except that time, basically the rebels go first with each action after that. So in this case, we enter the first turn's assignment phase. Each turn consists of 3 phases: the assignment phase, the mission phase, and then the last phase, which I don't remember what is called, what the name of it is, but basically it's when you clear the board, get your leaders back, draw some new cards, build some units, deploy them, etc., etc. So, so in the assignment phase, you can select any of these missions that are currently in your hand. The hand limit is 10 cards. So after you drew new missions, in case you had more than 10 cards in your hand, you have to discard down to 10. In this case, of course, each player only has 6 cards in their hand. So let's say that as the rebels, we want to play Build Alliance. Of course, these cards would be flipped over so the other player does not see what the card is, but for this video I will be playing them as it is, because it's just easier to track them, especially if you're new to the game that way. So let's say we want to play 3 missions, 3 of these basic missions with the rebels, and then this one would require someone with who is good in diplomacy and managing loyalty. So let's send Mon Mothma there, because if you look at the leaders, they also have these icons. Mothma is very much skilled in diplomacy. She can do any diplomacy related mission because she has 3 in that skill, and she can also do logistic related missions. Now the Dona, on the other hand, is only a little bit good in diplomacy, but is decent in handling intelligence missions because he has 2 blue icons. So let's send him to do infiltration. And then we have Leia and Recon, and they are both, well, a little bit okay, but not too good in doing fist, like these red fist missions, which I don't recall what the official name for them is, but let's send Recon on one end. You can always leave leaders behind to use later in the mission phase. Not to play missions, but to do other actions with that leader. So the rebels finalized their assignments. They could, in this case, of course, use the assignment phase related action card that is Leia's action card. So for example, if the rebel player wanted to play this action card, which in this case lets the rebel player to search for any specific card from the mission deck and then play that card with Leia, so this would be the time to do it. But we can do so later on in the game as well. We can do it on turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, anytime later in the assignment phase. So let's just skip on that and leave Leia back in the leader pool. The rebels say that they are set. They finalized their plans. Now comes the Empire. Let's say that the Imperials want to play Planetary Conquest. Now, Planetary Conquest has, it needs 2 fist icons to be played. An obvious leader to send here would be Vader, who is very good in these sort of missions. But let's say that we want to do something else with, oh no, this was a, okay, let's send Vader here, and yeah, okay, I wanted to make a good example, but it wouldn't turn out the way I wanted it. So let's say that we also want to play trade negotiations, which needs 2 diplomacy. Okay, now this needs someone who is kind of good at diplomacy and has 2 yellow icons. But for some reason, oh no, I can't showcase this either. Okay, I'm just gonna search for a card that would makes sense in this case. Okay, so what I want to showcase is that, like, for example, if we had secured the plans and we wanted to play this, and we need 3 blue icons here to play it. But if we look at our leaders, nobody has 3 icons on themselves. What we can still do is we can send 2 leaders on the same mission, and then their icons are added up, and then so we would have the 3 Intel icons we need to play this mission. You can only send a maximum of 2 leaders to the same mission. You cannot send more than 2. Okay, and then we would have a single leader back here on the side of the Empire as well, back in the leader pool. All right, we have finalized our plans with the Empire as well. We also say we are set. We leave the assignment phase of the turn and start the mission phase. So the mission phase, again, starts with the rebels taking an action. As an action with the rebels, you have the choice of using one of your leaders, either somebody who is sitting on a mission or someone who is back in the leader pool. Let's say we want to start with scoring this loyalty. So we send out Mon Mothma. Let's say we send her out to Geonosis. We want to get a loyalty on Geonosis. We can play this mission anywhere that has a loyalty marker, so it's not a remote system like Tatooine. We flip this card over so the other player or opponent sees it, and now they have the option to react. They could let this mission happen and then we get the loyalty on Geonosis. Or they could send a leader from their leader pool to try and oppose this mission from succeeding. If they sent a leader, then that would mean we have to roll dice to decide whether the mission succeeds or fails. In this case, we would roll for the relevant skill icons. So because Mon Mothma has 3 yellow icons, the rebels would roll with 3 dice. And since Taj has no diplomacy icons, the Imperials would roll with 0 dice. Now, is it possible to still fail the mission? Yes, it is. Because if the rebels score 0 in all of their dice, then the mission still fails. So, to put it in another way, the mission only succeeds if the rebels have more success than the Imperials. In this case, the Imperials would have 0 success, but then if the rebels have 0 success as well, then that's just equal, and the mission still fails. These dice that we are using are special dice that would come with the game, and one of the side, it's a 6-sided die. One of the side is a direct hit that you can see here. Another 2 sides are normal regular hits. So a single direct hit, 2 regular hits, then 2 are blank, and there is a special lightsaber side. So these dice have their own use in combat and their own meaning, but when it comes to missions and successes, a direct hit or a normal regular hit counts as a single success. A blank counts as 0 success from that dice. And then a special marker means 2 successes. So if we would roll this dice like this, we would have 2 + 1 + 1, 4 success. And since the Imperials rolled no dice, they had 0 success, so the mission would go through. Now, of course, sending a leader here is costly, because then the Imperials cannot use this leader again during this turn, and they are leader behind, they already use this action up for something. So in this case, Taj would have a very hard time opposing this mission. So let's say that they did not send Taj to oppose the mission and they just let Motma score the loyalty. Motma could also score the loyalty somewhere where the Empire already has loyalty. For example, on Mustafar. In this case, if the mission succeeds, the system becomes neutral, but immediately becomes subjugated if there is a ground presence for the Empire. If there was no ground presence for the Empire, which cannot happen at the very start of the game, but could happen later on, and they played this mission here, this would just flip to neutral. And if the rebels played sometime later another gain loyalty mission here, then it would flip to rebel loyal. Okay, let's get back to the missions and let's get back to the Empire's side. So it's the Empire's turn and they choose to secure the plans for the Death Star. They reveal the mission, they send these two leaders to somewhere where it's a remote system. There is no Scarif here, but let's say they do it on Endor. And then, again, the rebel player can now decide to send somebody to try and oppose this mission, and that would mean they would roll, since this is an intelligence-related mission, the Imperials would have to have more success from rolling 3 dice against Leia's 2 blue dice. As for opposing, you can only ever send a single leader from your leader pool. Even if you have multiple leaders in your leader pool, you can only send one of them to oppose your opponent's mission. Let's say that you do not want to send Leia, they can secure the plans. We will get them somehow later on. So in this case, a new token would enter the game. It's the secure the plans token. There are some tokens in the game, and it would go and be placed down to the surface of this planet. These tokens that are kind of rectangular, they can be picked up if someone from the opposing faction, like if the Imperials are the ones who placed it down, then if the rebels had any ground troops present on Endor, so if there were, I don't know, this force somehow made its way down through the galaxy and ended up here on Endor, then they would have, it's not really an option, it just happens, then they would remove this marker from the game, and then the Death Star would be vulnerable again. Okay, but this definitely does not happen. These forces are way over on the other side of the map. It's just something that's good to know. So if like the other faction has ground presence here, then they can remove the token. All right. Now that the Imperials had their turn, it's the Rebels' turn again. They can, let's say, infiltrate. So they play the Donna here, play infiltrate, and then what infiltration does is they could look at the top 2 cards of the objective deck in secret, look at what these possible missions are that they could use to score points and win the game eventually. Select one that they leave on the top of the deck and bury the other one to the bottom of the deck. So it's very useful in that sense, because then you filter through objectives that you think you can score and get rid of objectives that you don't think you will be able to score. Now, we could oppose this, of course, although there's a high chance that Dodonna pulls this off, since, again, Taj is not good at intelligence here. But there is another drawback here for opposing. See, if I send Taj to oppose, then we have a leader now, one of our leaders in a system where we have units that could move. We did not talk about movement before, But the gist of it is, or one of the rules about it is, that a unit that could otherwise move cannot move if you have one of your own leaders in their system. So if I send Tansh here to oppose, even if he succeeds, like let's say that like the opposition succeeds, Dodona fails this mission, they cannot shift through the objective deck. But there is still that drawback that other than using Tansh for something and not something else, we now have locked this fleet in place for this turn, which it may be a drawback some turns, or in some situations it's not a big deal. In other situations it's a really important thing. It's just a rule to know. Okay, so we will not oppose that and let the rebels do so. Now it's our turn. And let's say we play Planetary Conquest, a very strong Imperial card. Something that's only found once in the whole Imperial mission deck. And so we do so, let's say, here on Bothwell. Now what this card does, if it goes unopposed and succeeds, is that we can move an AT-AT, an AT-ST, and maximum 2 troopers to that location without needing any sort of transports or any other stuff. Now this rule about the leader would still apply. Let's say if we had Tansh here, we couldn't move these units out to here, to Bothwell, because they are already locked by our other leader. But it's not the case, and we can choose these units to move here. But oh no, if you look at this, then we would have no ground units left here, and this subjugated Maigito would then flip to just neutral. Why is this important? I will tell you later. But let's say that because of that, we leave a Stormtrooper behind, just to, you know, keep the peace, kind of just keep the place in check. We place the rest of these units to Bothwell, and multiple things happen rapidly. So one of the things is this place, a rebel loyal planet, is now subjugated. When it comes to objective cards, this still counts as a loyal, like a loyalty for the rebels. But when it comes to any other stuff than objectives, it is now an imperial system. We now placed units, ground units, that is important. So this rule only applies to ground units. We placed ground units to a system where we haven't been before. This is not one of our starting systems. We don't know if the rebels may have started here. They may have placed their hidden base here. So now the rebel player has to announce if this is indeed the rebel hidden base or not. In this case, it is not. The rebel base is on Yavin. So the rebels just say it is not the rebel base. Okay, so we are here. Now another thing you could see on these two cards, just lower than the skill icon and the number, you can see the face of Veers in this case and Krennic in this case. So these special missions, these one-off missions, some of them are linked to certain characters, certain leaders that you could recruit later on. You do not start with either of these leaders. If we had these leaders, and let's say we played Planetary Conquest with Veers, then that would mean there's that little light, I don't know if you can see it, like there is a little lightsaber symbol next to the leader. And if you remember, when it comes to missions, if we roll a lightsaber, that counts as 2 success. So if you play these missions, one of these missions, with the leader that is attached to it basically, then if the mission is opposed, you start with 2 automatic successes other than your whatever else you roll basically. but anyone else can play the mission. Like in this case, Vader can normally play this mission by just having the required skill icons. Alright, so this mission went through. We know that the rebels are not on Bothrow. It's the rebels' turn now. They can either use Leia to maybe move around. We still didn't talk much about movement. Or they can do a sabotage. So let's say that they want to do the sabotage. Play that sabotage with recon. The sabotage lets you place this sabotage marker to the planet, to the system you played it. If it is not a remote system, so if it has loyalty. Let's say that we would play the sabotage on Mustafar. Now, if this goes unopposed, if Taj is not sent to try and stop it, then the sabotage marker would go here next to the loyalty marker, and it would go over these little symbols, this blue circle and blue triangle. And what those are the productions coming from that system. So now suddenly Mustafar does not produce anything. The Imperial factories have been sabotaged there. Not only that, when it comes to deploying units, the Imperials cannot deploy units to Mustafar anymore until they remove this sabotage marker. They could still move to the system. Let's say they could move from Sulus to Mustafar. But deploying there is not allowed until this is removed. If we wanted to blockade Bothrow, because let's say, yeah, there are now these like scary ground units here, we don't want the Imperials to deploy a Star Destroyer later to this place and be able to move out to other systems, other neighboring systems. We could try that, but notice that Vader is already in this system. And so he would naturally oppose our mission by just being there already. So not only can you oppose missions by sending a leader, your leaders on the board also just naturally oppose missions if the mission played is on the system where they are at the moment. And so Vader would likely block this, since he would roll with 3 dice against 1 dice. So yeah, let's say that we do this on Mustafar, we just place this here, and we get rid of some production from that system. Now it's the Imperial's turn. Notice that we don't have any more missions that we prepared in the assignment phase, and so we have only one leader to play and use, and we didn't use him to block or try to oppose any of the rebel players' missions. So there's only 2 or 3 things we could do with this leader. One, the easiest, we could pass. We can pass any time during our turn in the mission phase, but once we pass, we cannot do any more actions other than opposing a mission that the other player plays. So we could say pass, and then we are done with our missions and anything mission phase related. The only thing left to do would be to oppose missions the other player plays later on. That's one thing we could do. Another thing we could do is we could just place this leader somewhere to hang out there. It's just visiting the system, really. Now, this wouldn't do much other than if the rebels tried some missions to play there, then this leader would naturally be there and oppose that mission being played. So this way, if there is like a very crucial planet where you want to build up your presence because you really need some mission to go through, you can place a leader before there to that system. And let's say in the rebels case, they really wanted to play this sabotage on Botvo. What they could do, where Vader is already there, what they could do is just, instead of playing Sabotage, they send Leia here, just activate the system, but nothing else happens. And once it's their turn again, when they play Recon and the Sabotage, now we suddenly have 2 red fist skill icons from Leia and Recon, contested by Vader's 3, which still is in favor of the Imperials, but we have a higher chance of success than to succeed with playing Sabotage. So yeah, that's another thing why you could consider just activating systems where you know it will be important later on. And as you may have noticed, so like each leader in a given system contributes to missions being played there or opposes them if it's the other player's missions. But let's say that that we don't really want to do that. We just play the Sabotage here, and then Recon can do one last action or one last type of action that we really did not talk about until now, and that is movement. Now, movement is a crucial part in this game, especially as the Imperials, but even for the Rebels as well. So you have to keep in mind 3 things when it comes to movement. There are certain unit types that can move by themselves. They do not need anything to carry them. Now there are other units that cannot move by themselves, so usually ground units. They have to be carried. And there are some of the units that can move them by themselves that have transport capacity, but not all of them. And those can carry the units that cannot move by themselves. Okay, so transport capacity is one of the things that limits what can move and where it can move. Now the other thing is, if you look at the map, there are these systems, like they are separated by these lines. The neighboring systems share a line somewhere, so Alderaan is neighboring Mandalore. Oops, let's select another color here. So it is neighboring, why? Okay. So we are neighboring Mandalore from Alderaan, but we're also neighboring Kashyyyk, and we are neighboring Cato Neimoidia, and we are also neighboring Corellia. And of course, here is Coruscant, and then we have a border with Ord Mantell. So from Alderaan, we could move to these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 systems. We can only move 1 space with 1 move. And once we move, because we do the movement with a leader, we then already have a leader in the system where we move to. So then that leader kind of locks the fleet, since you cannot move with your troops once you have one of your own leaders present there. So this way, each fleet can only move most of the time once in each of the turns. Let's say that we want to move with this fleet from Seleucami. There is a rebel loyal planet here next to us, Mon Calamari, that is producing capital ships. We don't want the rebels to have capital ships. We want to subjugate those Mon Calamari people. And so we send Tash here. We activate the system, send the leader here. Now we can decide what to move. Currently there are 2 units that can move by themselves in Seleucami, the Star Destroyer and the Assault Carrier. I don't think we want to move the Star Destroyer. It's kind of like too much to commit. Like I would rather have this somewhere closer to the center of the map. So let's just send the Gozanti. So you can, what I want to tell is you can split the forces based on what can move by itself and what cannot. We send the Gozanti, and we can select what it carries with itself. There is this little cheat sheet next to the combat map here, and you can here see, if you look at the assault carrier, this little number with a black contour and the white number here showing 4 tells you that an assault carrier can carry 4 units, and the Star Destroyer could carry 6. The Super Star Destroyer could carry 8, same with the Death Star. If a unit has this little chain icon next to them instead of a number, this means that this unit has to be carried and cannot move by itself. If the unit you are looking at, let's look at the Rebel side, has no chain but no number either, it means that it can move by itself but cannot carry anything else, like the X-Wing. Okay, so we can carry AT-STs or TIE Fighters because those are here. Let's say we carry an AT-ST and a TIE Fighter with us as support, and since we have a ground presence now on Mon Calamari, it becomes subjugated, and the Rebel player has to tell us now if the hidden base is here. It is not. Now, you can also mark what you find out about the Rebel places, like where the Rebel hidden base is and where it is not, on this little probe map you have next to the board. This is one of the advantages of playing online, because otherwise you would have to track this either in your head or somewhere written down, but this is really handy. You can draw out a few of these cards and mark Mon Calamari and Bothwell, because that's where we used the Planetary Conquest card, as places that are certainly not the Rebel bases, because we already checked them. If it was the Rebel base, then after announcing it, this card would be flipped over to show that it is indeed the Rebel hidden base, and then all the units there would spawn in to the location where they are, basically, and then a fight would ensue between those units. But so, since we are on Yavin, this is not the case right now. Okay, we have one last action left with Leia in this turn, and Leia is going to do something very daring and something very brave, and she just looks at these troops on Botwo. It's a Rebel loyal planet, and it's being subjugated by Vader. She had enough of this, and she will move here with all of our starting units that the Rebels currently have on the board. Now, Botwo and Tatooine share a border. You can notice that some of the borders are smaller and some are thicker and orange. They count the same when it comes to movement. Why it's important is because these orangey, thicker lines are what border not just systems but whole regions. So here you have like this, like Rhodia, Tatooine, Geonosis, and Rylot are considered to be part of the same region. And why that is important is because some objectives played by the Rebels are related to regions and not just systems. But when it comes to movement, it's all the same. And so we can move from Tatooine to Botwo. Now, as I mentioned before, the X-Wing and the Y-Wing can be moved by themselves. There is no restriction there. Same with the transport and the Corellian Corvette. The Corvette and the transport together can carry 6 ground units, and how fortunate we have 6 ground units to carry with us, and we will do so. And we decide to leave the Y-Wing behind, because we don't really need it. Actually, the Imperials have no space presence here, so our space units will not fight here, any Imperial units. But our 6 ground units, well, they have their work cut out for them, because opposing them is an AT-AT, an AT-ST, and a trooper. Okay, so this happens when a fight starts. You move the fighting units to this side of the board, where there is this little space for them where they can duke it out. You separate the ground units from the space units, you place the leaders in the systems. If you had a start of combat action card that you wanted to play, this would be the time to play it, starting with the rebels, continuing with the Imperials. We do not have Taj in the system, so we cannot play this action card with the Imperials right now, and Vader's action card is not related to combat. And Leia's action card is not related to combat either, so there are no action cards being played here. And so what happens is, what would happen if we had a space presence for the Imperials is we would fight in space first, but that phase is basically skipped over since there is no one to fight. And so we go to the ground battle. And we then have these 8 cards in our hand, 8 for the space units and 8 for the ground units, and the same is true for the Imperials, and we select one of them to play. Now, let's say we select this card to play. You can see that there is a part, like there's an upper part of the card and a lower part of the card. The upper part of the card is usually a stronger ability, but can only be activated if you have the related unit present here. So this would mean we can only play the upper part of the card if we have a rebel trooper here, but we do have a rebel trooper here, so we can do so. We can still choose to use the lower part, even if we have this, like the relevant unit present, then we just have the option to choose between the two. Otherwise, we would have to use the lower part. So we use this. Again, this would be in secret, so we place this out after we chose it as the rebels, in a way that the Imperials do not know what card we picked, and they also pick a card. Let's say they pick the AT-ST card. Okay, now after both cards have been selected, they are revealed. The card for the rebels destroys a triangle-based unit. Now, there are 3 types of units in this game, or 3 categories of units. And those would be units that are kind of light in their role. Those are the triangle units. These are troopers, these are assault tanks, these are stormtroopers. In the space, they are fighters like X-Wings and Y-Wings and TIE Fighters and TIE Strikers, those sort of things. Now there are medium units as well that are marked with like a circle. So these would be air speeders. These are the AT-STs. These are the Golan turrets, which we don't really have here, but it would look like this. Yes, these are stuff like this, or shield bunkers. And then in the space, they are things like the Corellian corvette, or the Nebulon frigate, or the assault carrier for the Imperials. And there are the really heavy units that are marked with oh, I don't know the word. They are marked with a box. It's not the correct term, but you get what I say. So this, it's a box, okay. So those would be things like the AT-AT, or the Star Destroyers, Or in the case of the rebels, it would be Mon Calamari cruisers or shield generators or ion cannons. These would be your largest units. Okay, but we don't have any of those here, so let's place them away. I just wanted to showcase what a triangle unit means here. And it specifies here that the unit you destroy with this card does not roll dice in this combat, so it is instantaneously destroyed. And in the case of the Empire, they use the upper part for the ATST card and it deals 2 damage. So notice the difference. This destroyed a unit, it just disappears, rolls no dice, as if it were never in this combat at all. Here we just distribute damage that can be healed and removed later on, possibly. So damage can be distributed individually to troops and is distributed by the one who is assigning the damage. So in this case, like the Imperials would assign the damage to these troops. Now we can damage 2 troopers with 1 damage, or we can damage 1 trooper with 2 damage. If you look at the units in this little cheat sheet, you can see how much health each unit has. The health is marked with this little triangle here, the red triangle. So the Mon Calamari cruiser has 4 red health. The Corellian corvette, which we have here, has 2 red health. An air speeder would have, again, 2 red health. A trooper, which we have 6 of here, has 1 black health. What is the difference between black and red health? Well, combat is played with black, red, and green dice. I haven't talked about green dice yet, I will in a moment. So red and green dice are the same when it comes to the distribution of each sides and signs and so forth. But if I have a damaged unit with black health, it can only be healed by some results on the black dice. So red dice does not affect them when it comes to healing. Okay. Yeah, so we know that they have 1 health, they are squishy. I think we just assign 1 to each of these units. Now we place these cards to the side once we played them, and now we roll for damage and for healing. There is an attacker and a defender in each combat, and in this case the rebels attacked, so they are the attacker and they go first. So they would use black dice, because if you check at the rebel trooper, not only do they have black health, but they roll 1 red dice each to hit. Air speeders would roll 1 red and 1 black dice. A Corellian corvette would roll the same. A Mon Calamari cruiser rolls 2 red dice and 1 black dice. Okay, so we have 6 rebel troopers, that means 6 black dice. But there's a catch. You can only roll up to 5 with red and black dice, no more. And you can roll only up to 3 with green dice. So in this case, we roll with 5 black dice. Alright, let's roll it. Let's see how well we do. Okay, well that's pretty damn good. Actually, maybe the best result we could have asked for. So, as I specified a while ago, these dice have 4 different sides. So there is the direct hit, which is 1 success in missions, but it means different, something different here. This is the normal hit. And then this saber is the special sign. And then there's, of course, there's like the blank side of the dice. So in combat, the blank side would do nothing. The normal hit can only be assigned to the relevant health. So a black hit can only damage a unit that has black HP. Okay, so if we look at the Imperial side, the AT-ST has 2 red health, the AT-AT has 3 red health. So we cannot assign this damage because it can only affect units with black health. Now the direct hit can affect units with any type of health. So we have 2 damage already that we can assign. Okay, and the special side of the dice means healing. But as I said, it only heals units with the relevant health. So in this case, it only heals units that have black health. But luckily, our troopers have black health. So we can remove the 2 damage that the AT-ST dealt with their card and then assign 2 damage to the AT-AT or the AT-ST. But before we do that, we have a chance to reroll some of the dice. Each turn, you can reroll once during the space battle and once during the ground battle. Now, each leader has a different set of skills, but not only that, they are better or worse in combat. So in Leia's case, you can see there are 2 numbers on the lower side of her portrait. On the lower left, with the blue background, you can see a 1, and on the right, with the orange background, another 1. This means that Leia can roll or re-roll once or 1 dice during the space battle step and 1 dice during the ground battle step. Okay, well, we only wanted to reroll 1 dice anyway because the other 4 just happened to be perfect. So let's reroll this 1 dice. Well, it remained just a hit. So it goes to waste, but we tried to make it better. Okay, after the reroll is done, we can now really assign this damage. I think we go for the kill on the AT-ST. It only has 2 red health, so hopefully, if the Imperials cannot heal, they will lose this AT-ST. Now it's the Imperials' turn to roll. The AT-ST rolls the black dice and the red dice, and the AT-AT rolls the black dice and 2 red dice. So that's what they roll. Let's see the result. They manage to score a heal, a red heal, so immediately that will save the AT-ST. And Vader can reroll 2 in the space phase of the battle and 3 dice in the ground phase of the battle. So Vader is a pretty strong leader on the ground. Now these numbers go from 0 to 3. So let's reroll the blanks that we rolled and also reroll the red hit because there is no units present on the rebel side that we would be able to damage with a red hit. Let's reroll them. Well, we got 2 more hits, red hits, that we cannot really use because there is nothing to assign those to. We can remove a damage from the AT-ST, so it stays alive, and we can deal a single damage to one of the troopers. Now, we went last as the defenders with the Imperials, so this is important because we had the ability to heal the damage that the rebels did to our units, while the damage we do back to them cannot be healed now by the rebels before the turn ends in this combat. So what happens now that both sides went is that units that have enough damage to match their HP are then destroyed. So this would be just a single trooper here on the rebel side, and this AT-ST holds on to this damage. And then we get rid of these units. And now we enter a second round of combat. before that, the attacker has the option to retreat. Do they retreat or not? It's a good question. If they retreat, there are some rules around it where they could go. So first off, if they retreat, everything that can move by itself has to retreat. But they can leave anything behind that needs a transport. So any ground troopers, or in the case of the Imperials, any TIE fighters can be left behind to fight. If we choose to retreat with Leia here as the rebels, then we have to move to a neighboring system. So we are right now fighting on Botwow. That could mean Nal Hutta, Toydaria, Malaster, Rhodia, or Tatooine. Let's delete the other stuff that we marked before. Okay. So we could choose between these systems, but we have to prefer systems that either have one or more of our units present, like Tatooine, here with the Y-wing that we left there, or systems where we have loyalty. So in this case, because we have a single Y-wing left on Tatooine, we would have to go back to Tatooine. And the other locations would not be legal because, well, having a Y-wing here just basically decides this for us. We cannot retreat to places that contain the units of our opponent, and if we were the defenders, then we cannot retreat to systems where the attacker attacked from. Okay. So I think we will stay for a turn more. We only lost a trooper. We might be able to take on these AT-ATs, AT-STs, I think. Leia is hopeful. So we go on for another turn. We play another card. The Imperials also play another card. Let me just... okay. Okay. So we play this card. We do not have a Vanguard present. We only have troopers. So we have to use the lower part of the card that reads as deal 1 red damage. So we immediately assign that red damage to the AT-ST, trying to take it down. The Imperials with Vader played Air Superiority. This would cancel our card if they had a TIE Striker in the system above us in the sky, but they don't. So now they have to use the lower part of the card, reading that we cannot play this sort of a combat card or tactic card next turn. It's only them who will be playing a card. Okay, so these two are resolved, and we go on for another turn. As the attacker, Leia with the rebels rolls first. We have 5 troopers, so we still roll with 5 black dice. Okay, well, look at that. Leia is strong with the Force. 2 more direct hits and 2 regular black hits, which aren't really useful against these mechanized troops, and a blank. Let's reroll the blank. It remains a blank. What do we do with these 2 black dice, or 2 direct hits? Well, the Imperials will be rolling again with 2 black dice and 3 red dice. So I suspect that they will score at least 1 heal. So I will over damage the AT-ST to have 3 damage. So even if they roll a heal and heal the AT-ST, it would still have 2 damage, enough to destroy it at the end of the turn. The Imperials and Vader would now have to roll at least 2 red saves to heal the ATST and save it. Let's see if they manage to do so. No saves or no lightsabers were rolled for the Imperials. Well, let's try to reroll these dice. Vader can reroll 3 dice, remember, so he's quite frightening. Okay, so now we have a black hit, a direct hit, another direct hit, and a single heal. The single heal is not enough to save the AT-ST, but it can be still used to heal the damage from the AT-AT. The 3 damage, 2 direct and the black damage, can be used to damage 3 of these troopers on the rebel side, and since the rebels don't have the opportunity to roll more dice and heal them in this turn, they are effectively destroyed. So the Imperials lose the AT-ST, the rebels lose 3 more troopers. Now it is just 2 troopers against an AT-AT, and the rebels cannot even play one of these combat cards while the Imperials can. It looks grim, so Leia decides to retreat. Now remember, we have to retreat to Tatooine in this case, because we have a Y-wing here. All of these units that can move by themselves have to come with us, and now we can decide whether we want to leave some of these ground units that would have to be transported here to try and fight their way through the AT-AT, or we bring some of them or all of them with us. Now we do not even have Leia here to help with re-rolling dice. I don't think there would be much of a chance against the AT-AT, so let's just keep them safe and bring these troopers with us. In this case, the combat was won by the Imperials, and it ends. Okay, so basically this was a showcase on how to play a round of combat. Now, if the Imperials had some space presence here, then we would alter between space rounds and ground rounds. So it would be like the first turn of combat would consist of first the space round, then the ground round. Then the attacker has the option to retreat, then the defender, if they can, has the option to retreat. Then, if they don't retreat, if there are forces still present who has to fight it out, then we go to round 2 and we resolve the space combat, and then we resolve the ground combat, and then this rinse and repeat repeats until there's no more units opposing each other left. Now there could be a situation where, let's say, we did not retreat with Leia, and we would like play in the same combat, and we lost these 2 troopers. But since we didn't retreat, we would have still the X-Wing, the transport, and the Corvette left in Bothwell in this system. Like, also I have to note, after this combat would kind of end, like after we lose the last 2 troopers, we would still have the option to go and retreat back to Tatooine. But if we don't choose to do so, these are left here, and then this system is considered sabotaged or blockaded. So this would be marked with the other side of this sabotage marker, and the effect is the same. This planet does not produce anything now, and although the Imperials are holding on to the ground, they cannot deploy here anymore, but neither can the rebels. Okay, so this was combat in a nutshell. Alright, well, we have played all of our leaders, both the Imperials and the rebels. So the mission phase ends, and we go to the last and third phase of this turn, and we basically clean up. So both these missions go to the discard pile because they could have been, like, they can only be played once because they are not part of the base 4 missions that you start with. For the rebels, they get their missions back because they were part of the base set that you start with. Then, for the Imperials and the rebels as well, your leaders go back to your leader pool. Then, the Imperials draw 2 new missions and 2 probe cards from the probe deck. So now the Imperials know, since like the hidden base's probe card has been placed next to the hidden base itself and out of the probe deck, now the Imperials know that the base is not on Geonosis, nor is it on Ord Mantell. As for the rebels, they draw 2 new missions and an objective card. Now, if any of these players had more than 10 missions, and objectives do not count towards this hand limit, so if they had more than 10 missions, then they would have to now discard down to 10. And now we have the option to recruit new leaders. So in this case, both players draw 2 possible action cards. This is Veers's action card, and this is a shared action card of Krennic and some of the Death Troopers. Yeah. So I think they are called Krennic's Finest here. Yeah. So we can choose between these 2 cards. Let's say we choose this card, that is Krennic's and Krennic's Finest's card. We get this card, the other action card is then buried to the bottom of the action card deck. The rebels can again choose between these 2 action cards. One of them is an immediate, so its effect would immediately come into play and lets the rebels choose between Cassian Andor or Saw Gerrera, and the other one can be used in the assignment phase, and you would get Medine with this card. Let's say you get Medine with this card. And so after you selected your action card, you go and search for the leader you selected. So here is Medine. Now, yeah, you could recruit in the game Chirrut, Cassian, Saw Gerrera, Jyn Erso, there's Wedge, there's Luke. Luke can be trained to become a Jedi. Here's Medine, here's Lando, Akbar, Chewie, Obi-Wan, and Han Solo. And these are the recruits you can meet in Star Wars Rebellion. But now we got Medine. And of course, we always start as the rebels with Dodonna, Mon Mothma, Reekon, and Leia. The Imperials have chosen a card that is shared between Krennic and Krennic's Finest, so they can choose between recruiting either of the 2. Let's say we recruit Krennic. Okay. With the Imperials, you can recruit Motti, Krennic's Finest, Jabba the Hutt, Suntir Fel, Admiral Piet, Ozzel, Yularen, Janus, Veers, Jar Jar, and Boba Fett, and Krennic. And other than these guys, you start with Tarkin, Palpatine, Tag, and Vader. Now, Krennic's card is an immediate, so you would have to resolve this right away. Alright, I'm not going to do that because it's not really important when it comes to like the rules of the game. Okay, so we recruited the leaders, and now we can build units. So if we check the loyalties of each system, some of them that have triangle or circular or these box tokens can now produce units. There is also a little number next to them. It is 3 or 1 or in some cases 2. So this would signal you how soon you will get the units you produce here. And the blue icons are space units, and the orange icons are ground units. And basically the shape of the icon tells you if it's a light or a medium or a large unit. But of course there are multiple types of units even with the same shape. So in the case of the Imperials, a blue triangle could mean a TIE fighter or a TIE striker. It's up to the player to decide which one of those they want to produce. So in the case of loyal planets, like Seleucami for the Empire, or like Geonosis and Naboo for the Rebellion, you get both of, well, all of these units that are listed under the system. Now, remote systems do not produce anything, and there are some, like a little bit more poor systems that only produce one single unit. All right, so yeah, you would get both of them from here, and when it comes to the Imperials, they would also get like both of them, for example, from Sullust. Units that have been sabotaged or blockaded do not produce, or not units, systems, and systems that are being subjugated only produce the leftmost unit if they have multiple. So in this case just a red triangle, and in this case just a blue triangle. The leftmost unit is usually the worst of the two that is offered. So you would then run this script that tells you which units each player can produce. So let's say the Empire goes for a trooper and an assault tank and an ATST. This is turn 1, so it goes like, because it comes from systems that has the little 1 icon under them, so they would get them soon. And then from 2 turns from now they get a, let's say, a Stormtrooper and an AT-AT and let's say a TIE Striker, and you place that here to the build queue. And then just a single TIE Fighter or TIE Striker, let's say a TIE Fighter on the third part of the build queue. When it comes to the Rebels, they get, let's say, 1 guard and a trooper, so you can mix and match these. This could be 2 troopers or 2 vanguards, or in this case 1 of each, and an X-wing or a Y-wing or a U-wing or a transport. These are all considered blue triangles. Just a small clarification, so fighters are ships that have black health. Capital ships are ships that have red health. So even though transports are red, are blue triangle units, so it's easy to produce them, even though that they are considered capital ships and not fighters. Okay, so other than those, the Rebels also produce either an ion cannon or a shield generator. That's a Star Destroyer. I don't know how that ended up there. Okay, let's pick an ion cannon. And let's pick I don't know, a U-wing. Okay. And so once these units have been placed to the build queue, they are rolled down at the end of each turn. And whatever slides down from the build queue, you can now place onto the map. And so this starts with the rebels. You can deploy to systems that are loyal to you, or in the case of the rebels, to the hidden base. But you can only deploy a maximum of 2 units to each system. So in this case, let's place the 2 fighters to the rebel base. And we can place, let's say, a single trooper to Geonosis, because why not? And let's say that we want to hang on to the Vanguard. We want to place the Vanguard to the hidden base, but we already placed 2 other units there, so we cannot do that this turn. We can keep the Vanguard, or any unit for that matter, on the build crew, and then next turn it would be available to be placed to the map. So when it comes to the Empire, they can again place some units. Note that they cannot place to Botwo, even though it's subjugated, because it is currently blockaded, and they cannot place to Mustafar either. So let's say that they place the ATST to Maigito, because we moved from here all those units to Botwo with that very special card that we played. Yes, and a tank to Coruscant. Now, you might have noted that some of the systems, the remote systems that don't have loyalties, that cannot be subjugated, what about those? How can you deploy there? Well, you cannot. That's the trick about them. You can move to those systems, but you cannot deploy there, except if you have a shield bunker there with the Empire and some mission cards. But I don't really want to talk about all these special exceptions, because we would be sitting here all day long then. Okay, so placement has been done, and that basically ends the cleanup phase. We move this tracker ahead to turn 2. The rebels did not score any objective. The rebels have 2 types of objectives. One of the objectives, or one type of the objectives, can be scored during combat. So let's say after a successful ground attack somewhere. The other type can be scored at the end of the turn. In each combat, only a single combat-related objective can be scored, even if you have multiple and you somehow complete the prerequisite for multiple combat objectives in the same combat. You can only score 1 and in that combat. And when it comes to end of turn objectives, you can again only score 1 objective card that is that can be scored at the end of the turn. All right, but we did not score an objective with the rebels in this case, and so we move on to turn 2. And then we would go to the assignment phase, and then we have 1 more leader now, and we can start assigning our missions. And then after we assign our missions with the rebels, then the Imperials assign their missions, and then here comes the mission phase, and all those leaders activate, and they move units around the map, and they play their missions one after another. And then after we are done with all that and all the combat that could ensue, after that it's called the refresh phase, I just remember. So then we move to the refresh phase, and again the rebels can score an end of turn objective, and we recall our leaders, and we draw new cards, and the Empire draws new probe cards, and we build some units, we deploy some units, and we go on to turn 3. Now, something you might notice if you look to this tracker closely, there are some symbols here that are not everywhere. So everything that is an even number, so like 2s, 4, turn 6, turn 8, turn 10, 12, 14, 16, every one of those have this little, I don't know, it's a branch maybe, something like that. It's a white icon. So this signals that when we move to that turn, then that is when we build new units. So it's at every even turn, we build new units. So when we move from turn 1 to turn 2, we did some building. But in the next turn, when we move from turn 2 to turn 3, we wouldn't build any new units. Now these units we placed on the build queue would still slide down, and we can deploy the ones that go down from the build queue, but we wouldn't place new ones there until turn 4. So that's one thing. Another thing you can see here is that there is this little medal icon that's present in the first 5 turns. So turn 2, 3, 4, 5, there is this little yellow medal. And those are the turns when you will recruit new leaders. After you recruited 4 new leaders on turn 2, 3, 4, and 5, you will have 8 leaders, and then you will not get any more new leaders until the end of the game. If you already have a leader that you would draw a new card for, so let's say we have Kuranik, and you can recruit each leader with multiple different cards. So next up, you would draw Kuranik's card and Yularen's card to choose from when it comes to recruiting a new leader. Well, you already have Kuranik, so what happens now? Well, if you choose Kuranik's other action card, you do not recruit a new leader. You end up with one less leader, which is obviously puts you behind when it comes to action economy. So usually you would choose the other leader. If you already have both leaders, you can opt for redrawing 2 new cards until you have at least a leader that you don't have already. But there are some very strong action cards, notably Ozil's action card, for example, that sometimes are worth taking even if you have the leader already. Okay, so that's about recruiting new leaders and building new units, and how that basically influences the game overall. Yeah, we touched on the most important things, I think. So what would happen during a game is usually during the first few turns, the rebels would try to gain loyalty in important systems like Utapo, which build really big capital ships and Nebulon frigates, or try to hold on to the Mon Calamari loyalty if they started one to again build big ships or gain some air speeders. So basically the rebels in the first few turns try to gather more and more units, and they do small skirmishes here and there, and they build up their force usually in the hidden base or sometimes out in the map. But then if they are out in the map, then usually the Empire goes after them and tries to hunt them down. And the Empire, on the other hand, is trying to expand through this map and draw the probe cards. And with the probe cards they drew and with the places they checked, they can then infer where the rebel base is not. And they can then start to try and focus on the places that they didn't check yet. But by that time, usually there is a larger rebel presence in the hidden base. So then it becomes like this war of attrition, if whether the Imperial can wear down the rebels in the base after they find it before the rebels could score enough of these objectives to close out the game during like turn 6, 7, 8, 9. It usually doesn't go longer than that. And when we talk about objectives, I might as well mention this because it hasn't been mentioned before, and it's an iconic part of this game, I think, is the Death Star and how you get rid of the Death Star. So if you look at the Death Star's unit information, you can see that it rolls 4 red dice. Okay, but it has no health. Well, to be more precise, it has infinite health. So it cannot be damaged, it cannot be destroyed. It is untouchable at the start of the game. Like really a menace you have to look out for. It destroys everything after some time, because after some time you would roll enough red hits or direct hits to destroy any sort of units. Well, how do we deal with that then? Well, there is a card that is guaranteed to be present in the Rebel objective deck too, actually. Like, there is one in these phase 2 objectives. Here it is. So you start with 5 phase 1 objective. One of them you draw at the start of the game. Then there are 5 phase 2 objectives. And then there are 5 phase 3 objectives. And those are the 15 objectives that you can try to score. So some of those are randomized from a preset of objectives available. So you actually don't know as the rebels what sort of objectives you will have to accomplish during the game, but 2 of these objectives are the same and they are always present, and these are the Death Star plans. And once you have a copy of these objectives, if you end up in a fight against the Death Star, okay, and you have fighters, so space units that have black health, you have some fighters that survived the end of that space combat round. So let's say that we played this combat round out and nobody got hit, and we have some fighters left surviving here. So then you can play this objective card to try to destroy the Death Star, and that would be by rolling 3 dice, and if any of these 3 dice ends up being a direct hit, like here, then the Death Star is destroyed immediately and the rebels score 2 points. So that's an iconic little thing that you can do. Sometimes it's really hard to pull off. As you saw it before, the rebel or the Imperials can secure the plans, so then this objective could not be played before the rebels get the plans back, so before they remove this token. And then, of course, you have to get the card itself, which takes some time because it's not in like among the phase 1 objectives. And there are other ways this could be made easier and harder for each faction. But then you can try to get rid of the Death Star, destroy it, and then it's out of the game. And then you don't have to worry about... Well, you can still worry about the Imperials building a new Death Star, but you don't have to then worry about them blowing up that star system they were on, or maybe the base itself, the hidden base. So that's the gist of it. There are a lot of rules involved in this game, and I naturally couldn't go through all of them. If you're interested, I think you can find the rules freely available in a PDF format in the website of Fantasy Flight Games. And if you happen to have TTS, or if you buy TTS, then you can download this free mod that I've been using here to play the game, but also to check on the rules reference and the Learn to Play booklet, and also the errata. These are all here, and the expansion rules set. Yeah, it's like, I don't know, 50 pages or so. The rules reference is like really handy. It's like ordered very much like alphabetically, and you can search for stuff easily there. But the Learn to Play booklet will basically go through the things that I told you here, maybe a little less. Yeah, and so with this, I think we went through the basic things about how to play Star Wars Rebellion, and I hope that with this information, you may find the upcoming games I will play during the tournament more enjoyable, or if you found this video because you wanted to try Rebellion yourself, I wish you a good time with that because it's an awesome game. Yeah, so cheers everybody and have a good one.